Hi, I'm Helen Carey, Director of the Fire Station Artist Studio and curator of this exhibition, Material Stories. The exhibition is a testament to artwork, the making of art, the displaying of art, and the presenting of art in this world where we've been so challenged post-pandemic, or even during the pandemic, about materiality, about abstraction, about quite simply being in the world, being present. So bringing these artists from Ireland all the way to Vienna, and our wonderful Viennese colleagues who come down the road maybe, but it's a coming together at a time when all of the notions of what art is supposed to achieve are being questioned. What I hope people see in this exhibition is the object and realise that there is a lot more going on in the world than either being physically present or not being present. And maybe we have to have a bit of both.
I have 3 works included in this exhibition, 2 sculptural works and a printed work. And I think the kind of shared element among them is an investment in an idea of surface. So I'm very interested in surface as a carrier of memory, or in the edges of objects and how they can sort of function as material archives or as ways of recording traces and remains of the processes and histories that have produced them. So in making the works of this show, I started by kind of translating geological processes down to the scale of the body. So I was playing around with actions or gestures like layering, stacking, pressing, melting, folding, soaking, or the accumulation of dust or byproducts from the studio. And in this way, I suppose I was kind of thinking about how materials cross each other's thresholds or cross categorical thresholds. And I'm really interested in this idea of a spill. So the sculptural work in this show explores how materials can kind of spill into one another, both in a narrative sense but also physically. And there are moments in this show where materials kind of reveal themselves to be fallible, or where ruptures or failures kind of emerge within the work. So an example of that, I suppose, would be that there's a molten aluminium kind of element in the work that is kind of hardened and made permanent, an overflow or an error. And there are other points in the work too where maybe the marks of mold making are present or visible, or clay slip becomes a sort of an intrusive marker of the production of the object within the mold making process. So I'm, I suppose, interested in this idea of material excess or material agency, and how materials, I suppose, sort of form each other, both through engagement with each other's histories, but then also through defining each other's material futures by interacting physically in the work.
The work that I have here in Michaela's gallery is new work, and it is based on my ongoing research on the healing mechanisms of ritualistic kind of practices and healing. However, this particular work is influenced, or like it's based on my research on Maria Jabuda's theories. Maria Jabuda's was an archaeologist, or actually should be better described as an archaeomythologist. And she developed the Kurgan hypothesis, which is that in pre-Celtic culture there would have been a matrilinear society in what we call now Europe, and which was a peaceful one, which was actually quite pertinent to nowadays. So I am drawing loosely from these theories, and I'm kind of looking at the return of the feminine intended though as all modes of being. So her there, and the return of the maker, the return of the feminine as a creatrix and a fighter.
So this work was made in 2012, and this work was made during a residency in Ireland, in Limerick, called Welcome to the Neighbourhood. And at the time I was working on the housing crisis in Ireland, and particularly working with an Austrian architect come designer, Frederick Kieseler, who was looking at how we could rethink building and how we could rethink home and the notion of home. And during this residency I came across this Irish cottage that was abandoned. And it was abandoned since 1987. And the last person living there was a woman called Helen Carey. And I managed to get in contact with Hanny's nephew, who was living in the village. And he then came into the house with me, and he said it was his first time coming into the house since she had died in 1987. So in a way it was very emotional for him to come back into the space and see the objects exactly as she left them, like her shirt hanging on the wall. And this, this piece is named after what he said to me in the video. He's like, oh yeah, that was her bed, she'd have no other. So all the works are kind of named after particular things he said about his life, because he had lived in the house with her and his grandparents. So the work is all photographed in that house in Askeaton, which is now destroyed, unfortunately. And you can see it's a very, very modest two-roomed mud cottage, pretty much. You can see some of the mud kind of wattling through the walls, with no running water, no bathroom facilities, nothing like that. All the water was coming from the pumps. But yet, look how beautifully she kept her house, really house proud, beautiful things, really focus on colour and objects. That's why I just love this piece. You can see how she really cared for her home, and it's just in such a modest, in a modest environment. And the video that goes with the work actually is 10 minutes long, and it is him talking through a little bit about his life as a traveller, an Irish traveller, and how that life has changed now because the travelling community have been forced to settle, and they're now called settled travellers, which is really quite a bit of an oxymoron.
And with Michaela, I have been working since 1 year. I started in the Salon Virtual Real. And back then it was a solo show. And in every show that I have been doing since 1 year, I always propose my own pieces. That's the one that I really conceptualize alone. But besides that, I also propose collaboration. And in the specific case, we are standing in front of one of the pieces that is actually a reissue of a project called Spell that I have been developing since 2009 with colleagues in Sweden, and that we try to expand. So there is one piece here that is like the main question that we ask. So how to maintain fashion in a world where material consumption is no longer possible. And this is something we want to propose people to reflect on the way in which one can be part of a movement without consuming too much. And that's why, for example, in another room we propose a reissue of the collection Zero that we created in 2009, where we propose instruction that people can create a garment by putting on themselves a movement and at the same time having specific thought. So that's the two pieces that are in that room. And in the other room I decided to propose like all the pieces are created specifically for this exhibition. And in the other room there is two pieces. One is des matières, it's a table. So in English you would say table of content, but this one is a table made in very basic materials that I just activate a statement on the top, inviting people to think that immaterial matters as much as material, knowing that immaterial is supposed to be something one cannot grasp. And there is a secret question underneath the table, so one can turn it around in the other room. And then the final piece is is an artist book, basically, based on different thoughts, questioning. It's a unique piece, and it's recycling several material or content that I have been developing along the years. There is also two texts. One tells the stories about the cart, where they come from, because I have them in my archive since 2011. And there is a text about an important exhibition that questioned immateriality in Paris in Pompidou in 1985.
I conceive my site-specific and theme-related interventions, objects and installations within the field of vision of the social and critical institution and art space. With unexpected combinations of material, I try to ask ironic, sometimes self-critical questions about the artist's self-image as a producer. I like to encounter the creative process in my work on the value-oriented art market with an ephemeral approach. In the exhibition Material Stories, several works from an earlier period are shown. Two works I would like to highlight. The first is Down and Mal P. It describes the demarcated and open space with a floating feather boa on its infinite circular path in its lightness. The work delicately touches the visitor and actively involves him or her in the material theme. The tactile experience begins with a tickle and ends with a smile. In the sandpaper series, two oversized sandpapers are presented, deriving their power from a certain coarseness coupled with the joke of uselessness. Designed for Gulliver's hands, they thus become shopkeepers in the hardware store and counteract the function of an abrasive craft.
So, needless to say, there are so many people involved in this work, but I think first among equals to be thanked is Michaela Stock and her wonderful staff here in Galerie Michaela Stock, where we Irish people, Irish artists, have beaten a thread too over the last 4 or 5 years. Culture Ireland fund Irish artists abroad, and it is a wonderful commitment to having other cultures see what we do in Ireland and develop and collaborate and really are in dialogue with other peoples. And it feels really positive that we can say that the dialogue between Vienna and Ireland is really healthy. So thank you, Culture Ireland, and I'm sure they'll continue to do good work. But an exhibition like this is an entity in itself at this stage. It's part of the materiality, the material story that it presents. It wouldn't happen, clearly, without all the participating artists. So thank you to all the artists, and in this post-pandemic world, hope you continue to make really good art. So making great art, I think they say. Thank you. I hope you will enjoy the exhibition.